Let me just ask one more thing that we do before we dive on in,
Okay.
because I love joining intentions.
Yes.
What is it that we want above all else for somebody who's watching this?
So I think, especially with the imposter complex, but just generally with my website and the podcast, what I want is for anyone who listens to this on their own time to feel like they're less alone in the space. So to just feel more like reassured and confident that they're on the right path, even if they feel completely lost or if they feel like everything is new. And when they feel overwhelmed, to think, oh, this is my diminishment talking, or, oh, I heard this in the podcast and now I know that this is probably going on in a lot of other people's heads as well, and to really just feel less alone, because I think that the law school can be a really isolating place when everyone feels they have to be all professional and smart and not say anything stupid, and that sucks. Like, it's such a difficult environment for people to feel vulnerable in, so that's what I want.
Okay, beautiful. We got it. All right, same. And and I also want you, I have a personal wish on your behalf. So I'm with you. I want your peers to not feel alone, to not feel isolated, to not feel defeat. And I want you to feel that you have really met your own calling, because this is really important to you. So I really want you to feel like you have met the desire and this empathy and this compassionate aspect of you, that you've really met that. So that's what I want.
Okay, perfect. Yes, we are definitely meeting of the minds. I like it. Okay, so thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today. And I just want to say now that I have Tanya Geisler with me, and Tanya is a certified leadership coach, a TEDx women speaker and writer who teaches women and women-identified people how to step into starring roles, owning their authority, and to overcome the imposter complex with unshakable confidence in their life, in their work, and in their life's work. So amazing. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for reaching out. Your mission and desire on behalf of your peers is beautiful, and how could I not be here?
Thank you. We're so excited to have you for the first podcast. And before we get started, I just want to say that I was listening to your podcast, Ready Enough, which is available on Spotify. And I love the beginning of your podcast because you said these conversations might not be perfect, but we're ready enough to have them. And I think that applies to this conversation as well. And I think that was a great introduction.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad. That's exactly what I want. I'm really wanting us to overcome our perfectionism, to have the conversations that matter, right? They won't be perfect, but that doesn't make them any less important.
Exactly.
So thank you
Exactly. If we wait for them to be perfect, we'll never have them. So.
That's right.
Okay, so when I had originally reached out to you, I know that I had found your work, and then I emailed you asking about the imposter syndrome. And then you emailed me back and said the imposter complex. So I did some work, and I just thought I would ask you how you would define the imposter complex and why. I know even at school, when we get spoken to about this, it's called the imposter syndrome to us. And I thought the distinction was really important in the way you spoke about it. So I'm wondering, what is it? Why do we call it the complex instead of the imposter syndrome?
Straight up, I am just a big fan of transparency. I'm just a big fan of naming a thing. And I like to start with a bit of attribution and a bit of history. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to speak into a little bit of where, what it actually is, and then the name becomes revealed. So, just as you all are, citations important. So for me, I always acknowledge the four mothers of this concept. Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes were the clinical psychologists who came up with the term imposter phenomenon. That's actually the first time it was discussed. So what they did in their studies, they saw that they were working with a group of women, academics, and they saw a through line in all of these women that they seemed to be incapable of internalizing their success. Okay. So any success they would chalk up to proof, luck, timing, or having somehow managed to deceive people into thinking they were smarter, more capable than they actually were.
Okay.
They their failures, on the other hand, they were more than able to identify with, right? So like, I made a mistake, therefore I'm a mistake. So that's really where that came from. Now, we actually know that this experience is actually, this fraud factor experience is bioevolutionary in context. It is part of our makeup to make sure we don't evolve too quickly. Ancient sages of India used to call it chala, or fraud factor. So it has been around since the beginning of time. But the first naming of it was the imposter phenomenon. And so, yes, we hear it as the Amy Cuddy, who wrote Presence and did that TED Talk, on power poses. She calls it the imposter experience. As much as my SEO people get really mad at me, I can't call it the imposter syndrome, because syndrome denotes a clinical diagnosis. And this is not a clinical diagnosis. This is a experience, a phenomenon, a complex. And so I feel like when we call it a syndrome, we're pathologizing something, and it's because it's false. I think that when we identify with it, people will come at you that have clinically diagnosed mental health concerns. They're going to, it's not the same thing. It's like having a fear that's not a diagnosis of having fear, or having insecurity, or having self-doubt. These are not diagnoses. So I just want to be respectful of the way our mental health system is structured. And again, it's super annoying for my SEO people, because nobody's searching for imposter complex, but okay, I got to do what I got to do. And having enough conversations like this will help to elevate it. And I think it's also really important to just say that most people do experience it. And so I think the prevalence of it is also really interesting and unique. So, a little like shiny object, we call it shiny object syndrome colloquially. It's not a syndrome. That's not an actual diagnosis. So I think that if we start adding cutesy sorts of things to the experience, then it, on some hand, ratchets up the importance of it, but in so doing, it diminishes the severity of it, because the imposter complex is some real stuff, and it gets really in the way. And I really want to make sure that people have the right tools for it and don't bypass it because it's been incorrectly named.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's such a good point. I love that. And the reason why I found your work, particularly on the imposter complex, so great and so helpful was for two reasons. And the first was the 6 behaviors that you had identified as, I don't know, not a coping mechanism, it's how we deal with, materialize the...
Totally, it's a coping mechanism. Absolutely, it's a coping mechanism. Yeah, they're behavioral traits, but they're really coping mechanisms. So, and here's this is why this work is endlessly fascinating to me, because all of these behavioral traits, these coping mechanisms, what the imposter complex does is it has us believing that we don't belong, right? So it's really part of that bioevolutionary tribal need to belong. So if you are a success or a failure, it wants you to be, it's really concerned about how you are relating to others. Okay. So if the whole thing is we don't want to be called out for the fraud, we don't want to be singled out, we're going to operate in such ways that we're going to fit into the fray. Okay. So what's fascinating about these is that in going to that behavior, the experience of feeling like an imposter gets exacerbated. So it's this double bind that is really fascinating. So if it's helpful, I'll run through some of these. Is that good with you?
Sure, that would be great. And I think, everyone listening to this will probably have heard all of them in the law school, particularly at some point in a conversation. Like I know I've said probably some form of especially diminishment, which I know you'll get to, but it's like, even just the fact that you got into law school, or that you got a good grade maybe, or a job interview, and it's like, oh, that was just luck, or oh, I don't know what the professor was reading. You know what I mean? And it's like, why do we do that? So yes, I think it would be super helpful to go through the 6 so that people listening know what I'm talking about. And also for anyone listening to go to your website, which I'll have links anyways, to take the quiz to figure out which behavior trait is the most predominant for them. Because I think the individualized component of that is so helpful, because even at school, for the talks we get, it's like, you might feel like an imposter, don't. And it's just, it doesn't really go into how it actually operates for each individual. So it's really hard to relate to that advice. So I think, so we'll listen to the 6, and then hopefully everyone listening will have taken the quiz and can think about how these behaviors operate in their day as well.
Yes, fantastic. So it's at tanyageisler.com/quiz. But if you could put that in your show notes, that'd be fantastic. Because they do, like I say, they kind of work the same way, but the behaviors are different. So let's just start with the one that you've named. You named it at the top of the call, perfectionism, which is the whole reason for my Ready Enough podcast.
Yes.
So perfectionism is, and this actually is one that Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, those clinical psychologists, referred to as diligence. But that their work was back in 1978. So we've kind of really looked at it over the course of, as it's been evolving. And so it's perfectionism. And how it shows up is, if you feel like you don't belong, hi friends, if you don't feel like you don't belong, and you find you're going to work 2 to 3 times as hard as anybody else to make sure that you feel like you belong, or to be perceived as the fact that you belong, right? So you're going to work so hard to make sure that nobody finds out that you got in here by mistake. So you're going to work and you're going to work and you're going to work and you're going to work. Okay, so that's what you do. Sleeplessness, anxiety, all of that gets compiled, and the pressure continues to build up. And then you kind of look up from your notes and you go, wait a minute, why am I having to work 2 to 3 times as hard as anybody else around me? Surely I'm the imposter.
Right.
Okay, so this is how that behavior gets you coming and going. So I'm going to go hide out in this behavior so I don't feel like the imposter. But by doing this behavior, I not feel like the imposter.
Oh my gosh.
So, right?
Yeah.
You can't win. Well, you can win. This is the whole point of this conversation. You can absolutely win. I just want you to see that that's what's actually happening.
Right.
And this is going to come up. We're going to hear this again in this kind of praise and criticism sort of piece of the imposter complex. So that's behavior number 1, and this is not sequential. And so maybe for some of you, you've got a good handle on your perfectionism. Bravo, because that's a doozy. And this was instilled from, it's instilled from a very young age, about work ethic, about our parents' desires on our behalf, about the structure that we operate inside of. So if you've got a handle on that, brilliant. Share your resources, help your sisters, your brothers out, because they're still grappling with it. Another place that it's going to show up, another place we're going to hide out is procrastination. Right? I don't want to feel like I don't belong, so I'm going to not do the thing that is going to show me that I don't belong.
Right.
So, right, we hide out in procrastination. We hide out in Netflix. We hide out in going on partying. We hide out in whatever it is that we hide out in. It's still ticking along, right? We still have these obligations and expectations on us. So once again, we have all of this anxiety and sleeplessness and all these things. So a couple of things happen if you are a procrastinator. And I know I hear some of you out there going, I know, but this is how I work best. Could be. But that fear, worry, that fear and anxiety that gets created is problematic. Right. So things aren't a problem until they're a problem, but I digress. So what's going to happen is if you procrastinate long enough, eventually you're going to do the thing, right? You're going to do the paper, you're going to do the talk, you're going to do whatever it is. And a couple things are going to happen. One, you're going to do a lousy job. How could you not? All of that compressed fear, anxiety is going to mean that you deliver a substandard product for yourself. Now, what happens there is that just reminds us that we don't belong, that we were given an opportunity that we are not worthy of. Okay, so on the one hand, once we get that experience against the other, if we do a pretty good job and people tell us we do a really good job, we then start to discount and diminish the value of what they're saying, because you kind of gave it only 40% of what you could have given it. Right. Therefore, their standards aren't very high, and they're not seeing you for who you are. The imposter narrative gets regrouped, you see? Mm-hmm. And then the other is you knock it out of the park. You do an incredibly great job. And you then become the person who says, this is just how I operate best. I need the sleeplessness, the anxiety. And trust me, my friends, that catches up with you. So there is another way. So that's that part of, that's how it gets you coming and going. Is that clear? I find procrastination can be tricky because it's very complex. Procrastination in and of itself is a very complex organism. But is that helpful so far, Dana?
It is, and it is complex because I am a procrastinator, but I can almost see each of those alternatives that you spelled out, that all of those have happened. And so I don't even know which narrative I even go with. And it just depends on the day where I'm like, this is what I need versus, oh no, I have no time now. And now my citations are going to be garbage. You know what I mean? So it's definitely tough. But yes, very clear. Yeah.
But if you recognize that from the get-go, so a huge part of what my work is really understanding your own patterns. Now, it's like, just get to know your patterns. Your patterns are beautiful. I mean, they are wise, intelligent. They have been shape-shifting with you your entire life. But the more curious we can get about our own inner workings, the more we can how do I want to say this? Anticipate what comes next. So I always recommend that people do like Dana, you are the world's expert on your call it inspiration to procrastination pattern. You are like the world-class expert. Nobody knows this pattern like you. Yeah. So write it out in 10 easy steps, like you were literally teaching a class. Okay. If you want to go from like really excited about something to feeling, very blah, underwhelmed, disappointed. These are the steps that you need to take. Okay. We'll probably come back to that.
Right.
Because we'll probably come back to that, but that's where I would have you go. If you are tricky and you find that these behavioral patterns will sort of shapeshift and behave in different ways, let's just get curious about what is very unique for you so that we can anticipate. All right?
Okay.
We'll come back to that if you want to. But I want to just make sure that anybody else who doesn't have procrastination, doesn't have perfectionism, another place that we're going to hang out is diminishment, as you pointed out earlier. Okay, so this is a strange behavior because it's like there's a way in which we actually do understand that we are skilled, that we are talented, that we're really good at what we do, and it doesn't feel safe to shine in that way.
Okay.
So what we will do is we realize, because we've seen it done before, that the person at the front is the one with the target on their back. So it's safer to diminish. It's safer to not brag. It's safer to write the less confident bio. It's safer to do all of those things so that we continue to belong to the pack.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But in so doing, all of that excellence, all of that talent, all of that skill that starts to get diminished, and we actually start to believe it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Because that's how the brain chemistry is going to work. So we feel actually pretty good about something, but then we're going to start to diminish, and in so doing, feel again like outside of the fray because now. So people pleasing is another place that we're going to hide out. Okay. This is where we want to make sure that everyone likes us, because if everyone likes us, we're not going to get kicked out. Mm-hmm. So as long as I'm a people pleaser, I'm safe.
Right.
And the double bind here is that because people like me, when I'm given an opportunity, when I'm invited to do something, when I am asked to lead, when I am whatever it is, I will chalk it up to them just being nice because they like me. Mm-hmm. Not because I am the best person for the job, because I worked hard, because I'm talented and skilled and excellent at what I do. I will overlook that because I'm a people pleaser. So that's how that gets in the way.
Okay.
Yeah? That's mine, by the way. That's my favorite. That's my thing. I can get invited to talk at this conference and then that conference, and then I'll go, it's just because they like me. We had a really fun time at dinner. No, Tanya, that is not why they had you go and talk in front of 1,000 people because you were a lot of fun at dinner. Does not work like that.
Exactly. And I think, sometimes you see like an obnoxious person or like someone that may be perceived as unlikable, and it's like a fear to be that person. And, you just want to fit in with your peers, and you want to have people want to study with you. You want to work with you. You know what I mean? So I think that's probably a big one in a social setting that's a lot like high school somehow again.
Yes, totally.
Yes,
totally.
Definitely very relatable.
So I'm gonna pause on the behavioral traits for 1 second because I want to just be clear about two very specific points.
Okay.
One is that the imposter complex has three main objectives. Okay, it's going to try to keep us out of action. It's going to have us doubt our capacity, and it's going to keep us alone and isolated. Okay. So in all of these behavioral traits, this is really what's happening. Keeping us out of action, doubting our capacity, or alone and isolated. So I really should have said it at the top because that's what's going to ribbon through the entirety of these behavioral traits and how we deal with them. The other thing I think it's really important to name is that we spend so much time not wanting to be that person that we forget that person, the fact that you are actually experiencing the imposter complex, the fact that you even think that you might be an imposter means that you're not.
Okay.
Actual imposters don't feel like imposters. Okay. Actual frauds don't feel like frauds. So that person that you're so busy worrying about becoming is not experiencing the imposter complex. Therefore, you are not the same as that person because you are in this experience. Having imposter complex means that you have very strong values of mastery, integrity, and excellence. That's the good news about the imposter complex, okay? You are feeling this because excellence matters, integrity matters. You want to call a thing. You want to be truthful. You want to make sure that that everybody knows that you don't belong, that you're the fraud. That's your truth. So that's where the integrity comes in. So my work is never about eradicating it. It is about overcoming it every time it shows up. But it doesn't ever go away forever and ever and ever. Amen. It doesn't.
Okay. And exactly. So that's it's a good thing that it exists. It's just to not let it, impair your mental health on a day-to-day basis, which is great. And I think that's a lot of with the programming we get taught. I think because when it comes up, they just want us to be as happy as we can as soon as possible. So it's like, just fix it, get it out of there. You belong, blah, blah, blah. We accepted you for a reason. But that's so important. And that's why I think your work is great, because it's about understanding it better. And then you can kind of like hear those thoughts and recognize what it is and then try to combat it instead of trying to have it go away forever, because it's important to have it. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm good. I'm so glad. For me, I call it, the Buddhist monks actually call it having a faster recovery. That's what my work is. I just want you to know what's going on so you can flip the light on faster and go, oh, I see you, imposter complex. You're here because what I'm doing really matters. Okay. All right. I got this from here.
Yes, exactly.
What I want. So that person that you're also comparing yourself to, or not comparing yourself, but if so fearful that you're not going to become that unlikable braggart, that person is likely experiencing the Dunning-Kruger effect. You heard of that?
No, I have not.
Okay. It's the complete opposite of the imposter complex. So if you're experiencing the imposter complex and you've got like high capacity and proof of capacity, but maybe a lower confidence, like on an ongoing basis, the Dunning-Kruger effect is the complete opposite.
Okay.
So you already know, like you can imagine the person, right? That has like all the confidence with not a lot of the proof. So that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay. So this is what we're talking about,
right? Not
this, which is why that imposter complex, having you doubt your capacity, which is the second objective, is so important to keep your eye on, because it is going to have you doubt it. Your job is to remind yourself on a cellular level all that you have done. We'll get into that too. Okay. All right. So we've covered off perfectionism, procrastination, diminishment,
and people pleasing.
People pleasing. That's right.
Okay. Your favorite one. You forgot.
I can't believe I forgot it. So I'm like, oh, I got a handle on that.
No. Okay. Just because you said it was your favorite. So,
yeah.
for the last,
then there's
Okay.
Yeah, the last two. They are comparison and leaky boundaries. I'm going to leave comparison for the last because I know how important this is for you all.
Yes.
So leaky boundaries, this is, boundaries are still kind of a new exploration and conversation. So on my quiz, interestingly enough, it's by and large the lowest score on when people will do this. Only about 5% of people, when they do my quiz, present with leaky boundaries. And it might be in my language, but I think it's just about social conditioning. We don't think that we are allowed to claim what we want, say no to other people. So I think that this is which is interesting because most of my coaching clients have very come to me with sort of leaky boundaries is what I would call. But I don't know that people understand that yet. But let me just break it down for you. Leaky boundaries really are around, this is what I need, but if somebody else needs something of me, I will give it to them first. So here's how it plays out in sort of a relational setting. You're part of a group. You have an opinion about something. It is not popular opinion. Maybe you pick your battles, but actually it's a little more important for you to relate to the group. So you find yourself agreeing with an opinion that's not your own. Now, so that's how the imposter complex will have you behave. It'll have you agreeing to things that you don't want to agree to. And then you do feel like the imposter because you are now standing in an opinion that actually isn't your own. See?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we had a little glitch there. Did you catch that? Because they would cut out a tiny bit there.
Oh, I did. I think it's okay. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's okay. There we go. There was a bit of a glitch, but I think it's good now. I did get that though. So how is that different from people pleasing?
So how's that different?
Yes. The leaky boundaries, right? Because just kind of wanting to be like agreeable, that's what I'm hearing. But I think, of course, there's a difference there.
Well, it's really about, the great catch that you've made is that both of them are related to what I would call a crisis of integrity, where you're not honoring your word to yourself, where you're not being authentic to your own vision, where you're not being authentic to yourself. So they are definitely related in the same way that perfectionism and procrastination are related because they keep us out of action. So definitely people pleasing and leaky boundaries are related, but leaky boundaries really is more about, I would say, it's actually interesting. I've never thought about this, but the vision that I have as you ask that question is people pleasing is much more like, I want to make sure that I want to make sure that you like me. And it's much more externally focused, whereas leaky boundaries allows people to take from us. And then we get, so our defenses. So I can be a people pleaser on my own time. I'll just show up and I'll want to make sure that everybody is, but then I will retreat. Whereas if you've got leaky boundaries, it's a little more constant because people are constantly asking of you. And so it has a different energy. That's
a good distinction. Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah.
Okay, great. And the leaky boundaries doesn't have quite as much to do with likability. It's more just, needs being tended, like needs being met at the expense of our own. Okay,
that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So there are structures that are really helpful to know about how to, who to, we don't have great tools. We weren't taught great tools about who we allowed into our boundaries. So if you've got leaky boundaries, kind of everybody can have access to you. And what we really need to do is create better structures around whose opinion we listen to, who we give of ourselves to. So there's, again, these are all super complex in and of themselves, but I think about, whose opinion are you going to shift direction for? Do you, how much do you trust them? How much do you respect them? Because I think if we have leaky boundaries, we tend to be very susceptible to what everybody wants of us. Whereas people pleasing is a little more, I might give more of myself to make sure that your needs are met. But this is more invasive, I feel.
Yeah. So people pleasing would be more of an affirmative, assertive action where you're going to go out of your way to do X, Y, Z, but you could still have your own beliefs and manifest your own opinions, etc. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, comparison.
Okay.
And comparison is linked to diminishment, in that when we get really stuck in comparison and we'll get really stuck in diminishment, what's happening is that we are not rooting into our own power. We are not feeling the fullness of our presence. And here's probably the most important, we don't have a reverence for ourselves. We don't have a reverence for everything that we did to get to where we are. So comparison, here's my 101 on comparison. Comparison in and of itself is a very important teacher. I don't think that, in ancient times, they talked about the ruler as not being somebody who ruled over. It was more like how we measured up against that ruler. Okay. So comparison is a great way to see how we're stacking up against what other people are doing. As we know, that the tricky thing about a comparison is that we tend to go looking for one aspect. We want to compare to see how we're measuring up in this one aspect, but then we see all that they're doing. And social media certainly doesn't help with this in any way, shape, or form when we see their perfect Instagram life. But so we don't want to feel like the imposter, so we want to compare to see how everybody else is doing. And in so doing, realizing we'll never be able to stack up to how perfect their life is right across the board. Yeah. So now we feel even more like that imposter. Okay?
Yeah, this is so interesting too with comparison. And sorry to interrupt there. I think that happens. We're put into this environment where our grading is literally comparative. And just so it kind of makes it hard to almost distance yourself from comparing yourself with your peers. Even my really close friends at school was telling me, he told me he was so jealous that I could leave the library, for example, and make time to go to the gym during exams. And when he told me that, I was looking at you and wondering how you were studying for such long periods of time without getting up. And I felt like, I don't study as much as you do. And so both of those things were going on inside of our heads at the same time. And, it's just wild how much that happens naturally, even when you're not trying to, or with your friends, for example.
And what happened when you both named it?
We just laughed, you know what I mean, right? Because it seems so, once you say it out loud and you realize what's going on inside other people's heads as well, it's just a much more humanizing and relatable experience, which is great. I don't know how, and that's kind of what I was going to ask later on a little bit about how I can foster that environment, how we can, or everyone listening to this, foster that environment to make all of us feel better all the time, because it is going on inside of most of our heads all the time. So
we are so, we are so complex, and we're so fascinating, and we are so sophisticated, and we are also so simple, right? It's like how we understand our own multi-dimensions. There are all these different things that are happening at any given moment. Somebody's listening to this right now, but also worried about the fact that their cat's fang is, swollen, and they've got this test coming up, and like, oh my God, is that still okay in the fridge? And I haven't heard from this friend. Like, all of these things are going on.
Right.
A million things are going on in each of our thoughts. And yet we seem to just, when we look at other people, we go, we look at them, we go, they look fabulous, they're getting good grades. Like we completely trivialize the complexity of the experience. So if you think about all of the different levers you have to push and pull and whatever, just know that everybody has to pull multiple levers, and you're not seeing all of the levers they have to pull behind the scene. And this is